What is happening here in John is a perfect illustration of spiritual warfare. Remember a couple weeks back in John chapter 8, verse 44, Jesus says that the Jews who were attacking him in the temple, he says that watching them, you can easily see how Jesus, I'm going to move this because I can't see Josh. I need to see Josh. There you are, buddy. Hey, there you are. I was in my way. Jesus is in the temple, and he tells the Jews, it's obvious that you are not following God. You are following your father, the devil. And then later on, it turns around about 4 verses later, they say, wait, I'm rubber, you're glue. Whatever you say bounces off me and sticks to you, you're demon-possessed. And so they accuse Christ of being demon-possessed, of which he turns and says, let's walk through that. Let's just see my actions versus what the actions of the devil are. I do this. I honor God. I glorify Him. He glorifies me. I speak truth. Satan does none of those things. How can you say that of me, right? And then he leaves the temple. And as he's leaving, remember, John writes thematically, not just chronologically, so we don't know if this is as he's going. We know he's still in Jerusalem, but we don't know a time frame between that moment where they pick up stones to stone him because he equates himself oneness with God. And they pick up stones to stone him, and he leaves the temple. We don't know what transpires between that, but he meets this man on the road in Jerusalem who's been blind since birth. And Jesus bends down, makes clay with the mud. And it's interesting. It's a very synonymous with what God does in the garden. I often like to believe that this man was born without eyes. And then what Jesus does is as he spits in the dirt, he fashions eyes. That's kind of what I think is going on. And he puts these little eyes in his head and then tells him to go wash the dirt off. And that's what I think happens. But the guy goes and he washes and he comes back and he can see. He can see for the first time in all of his life. And his neighbors see him that know him and they don't believe it's him. And he convinces them that it's him. And they're so excited, they realize, we've got to take you to the leaders. We've got to take you to the religious leaders. A miracle has happened. We have to show them. And that's where we're going to pick up today. And the reason I set this up is because what Jesus does for this man, Jesus wants to do for all of us. Not just heal us physically, but there's a greater aspect of what's going on than just physical healing. He wants to change our hearts and heal us spiritually. He wants to heal our insides. He wants to give us sight into things that supersede and go beyond just the physical world. He wants us to know Him, and He wants the depth of our relationship with Him to change us and transform us, just like He has transformed this blind man and given him new eyes. And the text just continues to illustrate, John continues to illustrate that Jesus is a healer and not just one that these things happen then. He wants to do this now in our heart and in our lives. And so what's amazing is as much as Jesus wants to heal, Satan wants to destroy. And what you see, and we're going to look at the next 20 verses, because what happens in these next 20 plus verses is you get to watch a spiritual battle, a supernatural spiritual battle go on. Now, interestingly enough, in each of our lives, this happens every millisecond of every day. You and I are in a spiritual battle. And because we live in a physical world, we oftentimes miss what's really going on. We miss that behind this curtain of what we call the physical world and the reality of the physical world, that there is a spiritual, a supernatural fight going on. Don't forget, the book of Daniel, as Daniel is praying for an answer to a vision that he has seen, please somebody come and interpret this. Lord, interpret this vision. In the end of Daniel, an angel appears to him and says, I've been detained. I've been fighting against the prince of Persia, the demon that's overseeing the demonic forces in Persia. I've been fighting this spiritual battle that you can't see, and I've been detained. But God has allowed me to come and give you this. I will interpret this dream for you, and then I got to get back. We don't realize that that's happening every day. Now, wouldn't it be great if you and I could see, not see the battle, but if you and I had the spiritual wherewithal to be able to recognize these spiritual battles being waged in our life? Did you know that you can? Yeah. Thank you. You can. You can see it. But here's what's interesting. It takes our hearts being tuned to God. You know what I mean by tuned? Do you guys remember the old radios, the transistor? Remember when the radio actually had to have a transistor in it? Nowadays it's like it flies through the air and light hits it. I don't know. It's like, magic how it happens now. But what you used to have to do is you used to have to, all these radio signals are coming, and you used to have to take this electrical thing and scrape it up and down a piece of metal had to scrape up and down another piece of metal till it somehow was able to read what was flowing through the air. You had to tune it to get to your station. Nowadays, you just hit a button and it's there, right? I feel like oftentimes as Christians, we're not tuning to the right station in order to actually see just what Satan's trying to do. Imagine in World War II, when the Axis powers of Germany and Italy and Japan, they were thwarting the Allied powers. They were up in the game. They were winning the first half of the war. And there came a moment. And our code breakers, remember, all of this energy was spent trying to break these secret codes, to learn their tactics, to learn why and how they're moving their troops and what's going on. And we were listening in and trying to spend all this energy doing that. And it wasn't until we captured a secret decoding device known as an Enigma. And once we captured it and we figured out how to use it, secretly, we were then able to, every radio wave, just about every communication that went across, we were able to then go, here's what they're doing, and we could then learn their tactics. And it shifted the war. That, along with some strategic things that happened in the South Pacific and in the European campaign, shifted the war. Wouldn't it be amazing if you had the Enigma for your spiritual life? Well, in God's Word, He gives us these stories like this where He shows us behind the scenes the Enigma. He gives us the Enigma to see what the tactics of the devil, what he's doing. And so that's what we want to look at today. We're actually going to study the devil a little bit this morning. And more specifically, we're going to study what he's trying to do and how the things that we must focus on in order to thwart his plan. We're going to look at the attack and the counterattack, so to speak. So if you would, look at your Bibles. We're going to start in verse 13. The question we're going to be asking is this: what are some of the satanic tactics he uses for our destruction? The first tactic you're going to see is this: Satan tries to discredit the healer. So in this text, Jesus has already healed this man. This man he now sees for the first time, and Satan is coming along to try to destroy that and discredit. And remember, who is following Satan? Jesus has declared that the Pharisees are following Satan. They are Satan's children, according to Jesus Christ. So they are following him. He is using them in his tactics to accomplish his purposes. And they want to first start with discrediting the healer, the one who did the healing. That's where they're going to start with. This is Satan's tactic from the very beginning. If you go all the way back to the book of Genesis, you see that at every turn, Satan is trying to pervert the plan of God. The one who does the healing, Satan is constantly trying to pervert it and destroy it and discredit it. He does the same thing here in this text with this man who's been healed. Let's look at it. Verse 13. So, this is the neighbors who the man has just shown himself to. Look at what they do. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been born formerly blind. And now it was the Sabbath on the day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. John is giving us context to the fight. Has Jesus already gotten into a battle with the Pharisees about the Sabbath day? Yes, he has. Remember in chapter 5 when he healed the man who was lame at the pool of Bethsaida? He did that on the Sabbath. They attacked him for doing work on the Sabbath. They attacked the man for picking up and carrying his mat after he was healed. And so now Jesus has performed this again on the Sabbath day, on the day of rest. Verse 15, then the Pharisees also were asking him again how he received his sight. And he said to them, gives them exactly what he did. He applied clay to my eyes, and I washed, and I see. It's very simple. You remember this guy, he's not getting into a theological how he sees. They're just saying, what happened to you? The guy's never seen Jesus' face. You know, he was blind, clay. He had to find his way to the pool of Siloam and get washed, and then he could see. So Jesus wasn't right there. He doesn't know any of that stuff yet. He doesn't know what Jesus looks like. He knows it was Jesus by his answer here. But all he knows is this is what has happened to me. Keep reading. Therefore, some of the Pharisees were saying, this man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath. But others were saying, how can a man who is a sinner perform such signs? And there was a division among them. You see, one half of the Pharisees, they were working from the law back to this person of Jesus. And one half of the Pharisees, they were working from the miracle back to this person of Jesus. And let me explain what I mean by that. One half sees that it's Saturday. It's the Sabbath. This man got healed on the Sabbath, and they run to the law, which says you can't do that on the Sabbath. Now, first of all, the Mosaic Law did not say that. The Mosaic Law said a couple of things. One, you couldn't knead dough. That was one thing. You couldn't actually make dough. And so for Jesus to make clay, they were equating to the same as kneading dough. You can't do that on the Sabbath, therefore you've broken the Sabbath. And the other thing is that because this man's life was not in danger, Jesus can't heal him unless this man's life was in danger. In other words, in the Talmud, there's actually, we have, which again is Jewish oral writings that were written down after the time of Christ, but about the time of Christ. We have indication that it was okay to do healings if a person's life was threatened. But if his life's not threatened, you can't do anything about it. You just have to let him suffer. And that's in the Talmud. And so they were going back and questioning, he's a sinner because he's not keeping our Sabbath laws. And so they instantly equate Jesus as a sinner. And that's one half of the Pharisees. The other half of the Pharisees is going, whoa. If this is an authentic miracle, and a miracle was done, then maybe there's something to this. And so there's a division that rose among them. They've both come from two different places to get to the person of Jesus. And now they're divided. And consequently, can I just tell you, the ones who are following the law actually have a stronger argument. They have a stronger argument because they also know that miracles can occur by the devil's hand. Do you remember Jannes and Jambres? They were doing miracles by the devil's hand. Do you remember the magicians of Pharaoh doing miracles by the devil's hand? And so the argument for the law is actually a stronger argument, believe it or not. However, there's a division among them because they do believe, the Jews believe that if you were a sinner, you couldn't do these things. And we're going to see that here in just a second as we keep rolling. So the first thing you see here is Satan's going after the healer. He's going after the one who did the miracle. He can't be who you think he is. This is the tactic he's using. This whole Jesus thing, it's not real. He's not truly the Son of God. He's not really sinless. Look, he never kept any of the Jewish laws. He's not the real deal. Don't trust him. Don't trust him. That's tactic number one. And I want to equate this into our lives because at the same time, he wants to discredit our view of Christ. He's going to come at us and he's going to discredit our faith in this healer and say he doesn't really do what you think he does. It's all just magic. It's all just a sleight of hand trick. And the guys who wrote this book, they just wrote down legend. They just wrote down, they wanted Jesus to be the healer, so they made him look like the healer. See, just if you don't know, there are huge swaths of atheists who see things this way because Satan has discredited the healer in their eyes. But here's the reality for us. Though he can try to discredit the healer, he cannot deny our testimony. Can he? He can't deny what we've seen. He can't deny what we've heard. He can't deny what's happened and what we now know. And this is, I was talking to Mike Massarelli earlier, this is the thing that is so amazing about Christ, is that each one of us who's had a spiritual encounter with the Lord, there is a story to that. There is you are a witness to something. And in that is the testimony of the healer. Whether God has worked a miracle in your heart, towards your family, towards your parents, towards your wife, whether he's done something miraculous in the world around you that you were able to see, whether he's opened your eyes to certain things and changed you over time, and now you have this story, this testimony. God did that. Some of you have testimonies of instant healing over sin where you were struggling so hard and God came into your life and saved you and changed you on the inside, and now He's completely taken those things away. Some of you, it's happened completely differently where he knew your faith didn't need that and it needed these things over here, maybe gradually over time. But every one of us has a story, and this is our testimony. As much as Satan wants to discredit Christ, he cannot take away or deny our story. Look at the text. Verse 17, so they said to the blind man again, what do you say about him? Remember, there's a division going on, and this man is standing here with the Pharisees, and he's listening to this debate going on, and he's picking up where they're coming from, and he's putting all of this together. It's amazing how astute this guy was. This man, because he had been blind so long, he had become such a good listener. He was picking up things so quickly, and as we go through the text, it's going to amaze you at how smart and how quick this man is. And as he's hearing this, as he's listening to this debate, and they ask him, what do you say about him since he opened your eyes? And he said, he is a prophet. So whose side did he pick? Did he pick the guys that are with the law and said this man's a sinner? No, not necessarily. He's, I think, more on the side of the guys that say, wait, he did a miracle. We need to really consider this. And as he's listening to this debate, he's the one that's been healed. They haven't experienced any healing. Have you? Has your heart been healed? Are you in the midst of healing? Have you seen something? Do you have a testimony of what Christ can do by the power of His Spirit? This guy does. And he says, he's a prophet. Now, is Jesus a prophet? No, he's the Son of God. But you got to remember, their view of the Messiah is that he would come as a prophet. This is what they think he's supposed to be. Remember, Moses said that God told Moses, and Moses told the people that a prophet is going to come in the future like me, and he's going to save us. He's going to be the true Redeemer, and we're going to see the true Exodus come through this man. He's going to heal the nation. So they see a prophet coming, and this guy says, I think he's that guy. Heard a lot of sermons on the progression of this guy's views, that in the beginning, Jesus, the man, healed me. Then Jesus, the prophet, healed me. And then later on, he's going to recognize him as the Son of God. Spoiler alert. The Son of God healed me. But I think in this whole process, rather than seeing the progression, I think we need to recognize that this man is giving a testimony of what has happened to him and what he has seen. And in that, he's declaring his hope. You're seeing him put his hope. Remember, his hope has been made realized. How long has he been hurt and struggled with this blindness? The Bible says in 1 Peter 3:15 through 16, this is what Peter says to the church. This is what we are to be about. Think of it, and now we're shifting gears to us. In your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. This is our job now. See, Satan can discredit, he can distort, and he can try to pervert who Jesus is in the world, but you and I have a story to tell of the hope that was put in us. Do you have to have a theological degree to do this? You don't. Do you have to be the perfect Christian? No. Do you have to be sinless in all your ways? You do not. You have to be someone whose heart is surrendered and who's looking for the Messiah and looking to see Christ in our lives. You're going to have the hope. You're going to have hope, and you're going to be able to tell somebody about that hope. So that's the first tactic. He's going to attack the healer. Now the second tactic is he's going to try to discredit the healing. In other words, it really didn't happen. Not just that this guy didn't do it, but that, or this guy's not who you think he is. He's now going to try to discredit the actual healing itself. Think about your own life. Were you really set free from sin? Were you really delivered from something? Has Christ really healed your marriage? Has he really healed that relationship between you and a friend that was broken for years? Is he really doing spiritual things? Or are you just wanting to see something and therefore your mind is forcing it in a direction? Like, we do that. We do that a lot. This is what we're praying against with all of the decisions that we're making with this building. We are praying against this tactic right here, that Satan's trying to get us to just force our agenda in a certain direction. We do that. And so this is something that he does a lot in our lives, and you have to kind of think about it. What is being laid before you? Is it of you, or is it of a place of surrender to the Lord? And are you able to see the difference? Watch how he plays this. He's going to try to discredit the healing, and he's going to use what we call mistaken identity as the tactic, right? In verse 18, the Jews then did not believe it of him. He just said that Jesus was a prophet. They didn't want to hear that. So Satan's going to go after this guy. You have always been able to see. And they did not believe it of him that he had been born blind and had received his sight. Until they called his parents, the parents of the very one who had received his sight, and questioned them, saying, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? Then how does he now see?" So they didn't believe him. So they kicked him out, and they go to his parents. Why? Because they needed a more solid witness. This one guy telling us stuff. No, we need to see more than just this one guy's. Let's go to the people who gave birth to him. They would know if he was born blind. Let's get to the bottom of this. It's just mistaken identity. We'll fix this. We'll get his parents in here. They'll clear it up. They'll say, "No, our son, he's really funny though. He's super tricky. You gotta watch that blind kid. He's going to come out and, give you a noogie." That's what they're expecting. But before we go into what his parents say. I want you guys to skip down to verse 22. It's going to be on your screen. I'm going to skip down just to verse 22 because the parents are about to come in, but you need to see what the parents are going to come in with the knowledge of. In verse 22, his parents said this, and we're going to get to that in a second. They're going to come in saying something because they were afraid of the Jews. Whatever they're about to say, it's going to come from this perspective. For the Jews had already agreed that if anyone confessed him to be Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. Now, I want you to remember that to be put out of the synagogue meant excommunication. Now, if you're a good converted Catholic from Catholicism to Protestantism, I say good, that you see Christ not as a Jesus plus the church or Jesus plus the law, but you see Christ crucified alone by which you're saved. You'll remember back that oftentimes excommunication meant that if the Pope were to excommunicate you, you would then lose your salvation. You could not worship with the church. You could not pray people out of purgatory. You could do nothing. You were damned, was the idea. For a Jew to be excommunicated is very similar. It means that you are kicked out of the faith, that you cannot worship with the body, but it also means that the body can't they can't participate with you. In other words, you can't go and buy and sell because they're not going to sell to you. They're going to treat you as an unclean Gentile, and they're going to kick you out like a Samaritan and want nothing to do with you. So the parents go into this situation realizing that if we say that our son was healed by Jesus and we call Jesus the Messiah, we're done. You see the pressure that's on them? Now let's go back and let's look at verse 20. His parents, they show up. His parents answered them and said, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind." So from that perspective, they honor God. They're not going to lie. They're not going to just throw their son under the bus completely. They're not going to say, no, he's always been able to see. We got to go, They didn't say that. They were honest. They said, no, this is our son. Yes, he has been born. He was blind since he was born. But notice what they don't do. But how he now sees, we do not know. Or who opened his eyes, we do not know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself. So it gives us gives us some ideas into what's going on in their heart, in their life. One, this kid, whoever he is, he's a man. He's probably in his 20s, early 20s is kind of what most theologians believe, although we don't know. But we do know that he's way past the bar mitzvah age. He's way into the age of he can now answer legally for himself. We also see the parents' heart in this. You've got to remember that this guy has probably been a burden to them. Do you remember what the disciples asked in verse 1 and 2 to Jesus when they saw this man? Who sinned? Was it this man who sinned prior to his birth somehow, or was it his parents? Remember, his parents have been labeled as sinners. People who something they did hurt their son. And he's been a burden to them all their life, since his birth. And so there's this incredible family dynamic that's happening here. And Satan, what he's trying to do is he's trying to go in and he's trying to pervert specifically. We cannot believe that this is the real deal, that whatever God has done in this man's life is real. And we've got to get everybody else on board, and we've got to scare everybody. We've got to make everybody afraid to stand up and say what they truly know in their heart. Have you felt that way about anything God's been doing in your life? If you stand up and speak out, are you going to be persecuted? Is the healing that He's doing and has done in your life and in your heart worthy of being shouted from the mountaintops? Or is it something that you are constantly pulling back? I can't tell everybody what's happened, because if I do, then they're going to see more into my life. Then they're going to know what's really going on. If I have to tell my friends that God is healing me from a porn addiction, then my friends are going to know that I've been looking at porn, right? If I have to say He's transformed my heart, I was having affairs, I was cheating on my spouse, and I want to shout it from the mountaintop that God is healing me, I can't do that, because then I'm going to be labeled. Then they're going to see me some way. I'm a drunk. Satan just gets in our head. I'm an adulterer. I'm a drunk. I lie. I cheat. I steal. I'm a bad person. I can't start talking about how God's healing me or changing me or what He's doing in my heart. Because as soon as and not until I'm like way past it, right? Well, I'm super healed and I'm super way past this and I've got all the victory from Christ living in my life. Because if I start to truly talk about what Jesus is doing, well, then they're going to know who I am. And they're not going to want to be around me. Do you see the tactic? It's not just Jews 2,000 years ago with a blind guy. It's today. So He can't deny our testimony in the same way He can't deny our transformation. He can't deny. He can discredit the healing all He wants, but at the end of the day, the believer who has been healed and touched by the Spirit of God transforms. You're different. You change. It's a fact. So what does that look like? Do you have a testimony of transformation? Verse 24. So, a second time they called the man who had been born blind and said to him, stop real fast. So they kicked the parents out. They didn't get the answer they wanted. And they go get the kid again and they bring him back in. And they say, give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner. So what they're basically saying is, the idea of give glory to God is an oath. They're calling down an oath. It's like saying, put your hand on the Bible and raise your right hand and swear on the Lord that the testimony you're giving is true, nothing but the truth, right? They're pretty much doing this. Notice, they say, give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner. In other words, they're basically saying, God does not work miracles through sinners. We know this man is a sinner. He did work on the Sabbath. He's broken the Sabbath day, and because he's a sinner, we know that God has not healed you. Now, here's what's crazy. This is so ironic, because believe it or not, the irony is that if you look back through the entire Bible, every miracle ever done was done through a sinner. When they say we know that no sinners do miracles, Elijah was a sinner. Elisha was a sinner. Moses was a sinner. There's not a single one of them that wasn't conceived in sin and struggled with it their entire life. Do this sometime. Oh my gosh. Look at the book of Judges. And watch how God does miracles through these men and transforms the nation. And these guys, especially towards the end of Judges, they were not great guys at all. A lot of them. They were just broken men who God was using to do miraculous things. The irony is they're calling Jesus a sinner, and He's the only miracle worker that's never sinned. Everyone else is a sinner. So their basis for their truth and what they're going with here is completely false. We know that sinners can't do this kind of stuff. No, wrong. Sinners can do it through the power of God. Sinners can do anything through the power of God. God can transform your life, as broken, as beat up, as wounded as you are. He can transform you and do miraculous things in you and through you, regardless regardless. That's because He's God. The power is His to do, not yours. Notice what the man says. He then answered, whether he's a sinner, I don't know. Stop right there for a second. This guy's not going to speculate towards something that he has no idea to do. Now, the sinner that they're talking about is they believe that specific sins cause specific issues, right? So they have blamed him as being blind, as having sinned specifically, or his parents specifically. But speaking to him doing work on the Sabbath, that Jesus did work on the Sabbath, this guy's not even going to touch that. See, that's a tactic. Satan wants to derail you. It's like, it's the fallacy of a red herring. I'm going to get you over here thinking this, and we're going to just whiz past what's really happening, the truth here. And so look at what happens. Whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. Can you say that? This plays into your testimony, right? He's given you a story, but has he not also given you the transformation to look back on? If you're struggling with doubt in your life, is there any kind of fruit that is played out in your life by the transformation of the power of the Holy Spirit? Of course there will be. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, this is the pattern of the work of God. There's always spiritual fruit. There's always transformation. It may not be that you are the greatest evangelist in the world. It may not be that all of a sudden you are this thing to the Christian community now. But you're going to find that the evidence that is played out in your life points towards spiritual transformation. Lacey Carter said something one time about me. It's wickedly offensive. That woman, she is mean. She said of me once, Chris, you're very unexpected. You want to know why she said that? Is Lacey even here? Lacey. She in the back? Good. She said, Chris, you're very unexpected. You know what she meant by that? We didn't see this coming, Chris. This whole, what Jesus is doing thing. We didn't see that in you. You know what they saw? What she saw? Prison. I don't know. She saw something other than this. You're very unexpected. Me too, trust me. I agreed. I'm like, yeah, I know, right? Who would have guessed it? Because something has happened. She's able to look at my life and look at the transformation that God has been doing, and they're like, this wasn't the trajectory 25 years ago, Wilson. Can you do that? I bet you can. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, I bet you could do the exact same thing. The trajectory changed somewhere, and the life has been transformed and has been made new. J.I. Packer, the Anglican, Reformed Anglican brother in Canada, he said this. He said, the truth is that though we were justified by faith alone, the faith that justifies is never alone. It always produces fruit, a transformed life. I agree with that 100%. And it may not be that the transformation that has happened looks like cookie cutter, like everybody, like it's all got to look the same. Sometimes we fall into that fallacy as well, that if I've been transformed and you've been transformed, that your transformation should look like my transformation. And that is simply not true. But what is true is that the faith that you put in Jesus Christ is ultimately going to change you. And Satan can't deny that. The world can't deny that. They can't deny your story, and they can't deny the ultimate transformation. And the last tactic that I want you to see is that he's going to try to discredit the healed, the person who is healed. So now, this man in the text, he's been questioned twice. They did not believe that it was that the healer did it, that Jesus was the one who did it. They didn't believe that the true healing was this man and done the way it was, and they thought, no, this is just mistaken identity. Well, now they're going to attack the one who was specifically healed. And this is what Satan's going to do to you, that if he's healing your life, the world's going to come after you. Satan doesn't want anybody to know that you have been transformed. He doesn't want anybody to know that God can truly fix the brokenness that is caused by our sin in this world. And so he's going to come after you. That's tactic number 3. And look what he does. Verse 26, so they said to him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? Now, hasn't this man already answered this statement, this question? He's already given them an answer. He answered them, I've already told you, and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? What's your game, boys? This cat, this joker, he is amazingly astute. I already told you guys this. You kicked me out. You brought my parents in because you didn't believe me. And now you brought me back. You want me to answer the same question again. Wait, I got it. I know why. Look at verse 31. We know that God doesn't, and look at there in verse 27. You do not want to become his disciples too, do you? I get it. You guys think he's the Messiah. You want to follow him, right? There's a little bit of sarcasm here, by the by. 28. They reviled him and said, you're his disciple? We are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses. But as for this man, we do not even know where he's from. This is a spiritual from. They're going back to, once again, that idea that he's a sinner, therefore he can't do miracles. He's not from God. Before, they were always questioning that his physical birth, they said he was from Galilee when he was actually born in Bethlehem. Remember this? Jesus is from Galilee. No Messiah comes from Galilee. The Bible doesn't, or the Old Testament doesn't say that a Messiah is going to come from Galilee. This is now, they're attacking his spiritual origin. We don't know where this guy's from. But we know where Moses is from. We know God spoke to Moses. But this guy, we don't know if God's speaking to him. You're his disciple? We're not going to do that. And so as they try to discredit this man, the one thing Satan can't deny is ultimately the truth. They can't get past the truth. Look at verse 30. And the man answered and said to them, well, here is an amazing thing. I love it. Is this guy scared? No. Church, let's take a lesson. Everybody just look at this guy for a second. Does he have anything to lose? He's been blind since birth. He's got nothing to lose. He, for the first time, sees not only color, he for the first time sees anything and everything. If I were this guy, I probably couldn't stop crying over the amazingness of the world that for so long had been black to me. Does he have anything to lose? No. Church, do you have anything to lose? Do you have anything to lose? The answer is no. Because the world, all things were black to you until the Spirit touched your heart and transformed you. You've got nothing to lose. He's given you life eternal. He's healing you. He wants to heal you, wants to transform you. You've got nothing to lose. Here is an amazing thing. That you don't know where he is from, and yet he opened my eyes. Can you go to your coworkers? Can you go to the world and say, you don't want to trust in Jesus. You don't want to believe that he is the Son of God, but let me tell you, he's opened my eyes. You don't know where he's from. Can we really trust this Jesus guy? All I know is I was blind and now I see. This is an amazing thing that you can't see that. In verse 31, And he confesses what the Pharisees have said. He says, we know that God does not hear sinners. That's something that the Pharisees believed. He's agreeing with them. He's getting on the same page. He's finding a commonality here. This is an amazing thing that you guys don't know where he's from, but yet he's opened my eyes. We know that sinners aren't heard by God. But if anyone is God-fearing and does his will, he hears him. So now he's explaining the truth. If a person is in sin and a person is walking away from the Lord and not submitting in a love relationship, you know what the fear of the Lord is? It's this idea that I love and respect God so much, way more. I fear Him. I want to follow Him. I love Him. I want to do His will. My desires are His desires. We know that God hears these people that do that. He opened my eyes. Are we putting two and two together here, Pharisees? And notice what he said. Verse 32, since the beginning of time, it has never been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. This has never been heard of. We've heard of people who have gone blind and maybe got their sight back or something, but a person born without the eyeballs or the ability to see has never been heard of. And if this man were not from God, he could do nothing. I'm using your logic, Pharisees. You say he's a sinner, but you know that if he is, he could not have done this. My parents have testified that it was done. The neighbors testified that it was done. I testified that it was done. There is my testimony. There is the physical transformation that you see. So why would you deny truth? In verse 34, they answered him, you were born in sin. You know what they go back to? Argument number one. You're a sinner. Jesus, was this man born from sin? Did he sin or did his mom sin? His dad sin? Who? This is the disciples' man? He just goes back. They're going to run right back through the whole list of things. Sit in their deception. You were born entirely in sin, and you are teaching us. Their arrogance, their hubris is choking. And so they put him out. Do you see these tactics? And do you see the tools? Satan's going to come at us. He's going to try to attack Jesus. He's going to try to attack what Jesus is doing in your life, and then he's going to try to discredit and attack you. Those are three simple things. You know, he discourages, he disillusions us. He does all these things to try to take us out of the game. And we often forget that God has given us a story to tell. We often forget that God has given us a life transformed. And we forget that there's truth. Church, do you realize that if we stopped trying to feed our own opinions about things and we started actually searching for what is true, that simple decision made from me, away from me, and to the Lord, that simple thing of let's find truth. Truth. Even if it doesn't make sense. You realize that truth doesn't have to make sense. I mean, we understand certain things about string theory. We don't understand all of it, but we realize that something's going on here, right? You know what I'm saying? Quantum physics, there's stuff going on that we know something's happening. We can see the effects of it. We don't understand how it's happening. We can realize there's something going on here, whether I understand it or not. But if we just begin to seek the truth of God, He's going to take off scales off our eyes, and we're going to see things. I promise you, church, we're going to see things that will bring us to our knees. They're going to bring us to our knees in worship and in prayer. And if you are in a place right now where that's already happened to you, you've seen behind the curtain, you can't unsee what you've already seen of the wizard, You know Jesus is the Son of God. You know He's the Messiah, but maybe Satan's over there pounding on you with these tactics. He's trying to take you out. You have the Enigma. Let's use it. We know what he's doing. Let's run this race with perseverance. Where do we focus our eyes? On Christ, the author. He wrote this thing, the Perfector. What's He trying to do in you? What's this healing about? He's trying, the Perfecter of our faith. Let's do this following Him. And let's not be afraid. Don't be afraid of your reputation. Don't be afraid of what people are going to say if they find out God is working in your heart. Let's use this as a means to worship Him. And as our church is changing and growing, we don't know all that's going, where we're going to be in 3 months. We don't know where we're going to be in 6 months. But you know what? Does that even matter? It doesn't. I can tell you what, I'm not scared. You know why I'm not scared? Our elders aren't scared. Because we've got this right here. We've got this story to fall back on. And not just words on a page. I've got every one of your stories as well. Amen? We've all been transformed. We don't have to worry. We don't have to panic. We don't have to fear. What we have to do is be faithful. That's our job. We're going to stop here. We're going to keep plowing through this next week, and we're going to actually see how Jesus then, at the end of this whole thing, confirms everything that He's done in the mind and heart of the one who couldn't see Him. We're going to get to the end of the struggle, the end of the trial, and watch what God does.